What are the limits of bronze casting? Is it possible to cast a feather in bronze? Let's find out. I don't know what kind of feather this is, but I do know it's a little bit too long to fit in my flask, so I need to trim it down. And to test if this works, I'm not going to do anything special. I'm just going to attach it to a sprue tree and burn it out. The burned out feather will leave a void in the exact shape of a feather, and hopefully I can fill it back up with bronze. Now for this, I simply added the feather to an existing sprue tree. In this case, a resin cast of a queen alien. Super simple, let's see if it works. The alien queen was a fun project. I'll attach a link to that video in the description. The investment powder is incredibly fine and it should capture every little detail of this feather. Once the investment is poured, it'll go into the kiln. In theory, the feather will completely disappear and turn to ash. Now I think the key to this is going to be vacuum casting, so I'll seal up my vacuum chamber, get the metal ready, and then we'll pour this. The flask goes into the vacuum chamber hot, and that'll keep the metal liquid longer, so it has time to reach all those thin spaces of the feather. If the feather burned away, the vacuum should draw the metal through all the tiny spaces left behind. Well, the alien turned out really well, but the feather not so much. Looks pretty ratty. The metal went all the way down the shaft, but it didn't fill in all the... what are they called? The feathery parts. I'll cut it off and clean it up and we'll see what we got. Well, that didn't work. I think we're at the limits of what bronze can do, but it might be able to help it out. Now the main problem is the feather is just too thin, but I'm going to try something that might work to thicken it up. I'm going to take some of my casting wax and melt it and then paint it onto the feather to hopefully thicken it up. The thicker space should allow more metal to retain its heat until it has time to fill all the void. The front side still has all the detail of a natural feather. The back side, it looks like somebody painted wax all over it. So with the wax on one side, I'm hoping it's thick enough for the bronze to get through there. And the front side still looks pretty good. Actually, holding it up here, I can see some thin spots from my camera light. So I'm going to put one more coat on there for good measure. Then we'll sprue it up. This is another experiment. I took a feather and I'm going to just dunk it in the wax. So there's a thin coat. It still looks pretty good. It's a very thin coat of wax, but let's see if it'll cast. So we got two feathers done, one with wax painted on the back, the other just dipped in wax. On this one you can see the detail of the feather on both sides. On this one just the front side, but it's a lot thicker. So I'm going to find a sprue tree to hijack and stick these on there. Here's one to hijack now. I'm going to stick these feathers together with Arnold and see if it works. I just set these into sprue wax and then attached them to the sprue plug. After Arnold fills up, it'll fill up these feathers. This is a slightly different type of investment, but I go over that in the Arnold video. Now I have put these flasks in the kiln without taking the tape off, and it works, but it leaves behind a surprising amount of ash and makes a mess, so it's best to take it off. Like before, it goes into the kiln, it gets burned out, and then we're ready for the metal. The metal I use is silicon bronze, which is prized by sculptures for the ability to flow into the tiniest space. The vacuum chamber gets a coat of fresh new silicone, and I'll put the flask in. It has a good pull on the vacuum, so hopefully this will work. A little trick to tell if it's still hot or not, you can take a stick and touch it. If there's fire, it's still hot. The flask retains heat really well, and I'm surprised at how long this actually stays molten. Sometimes it can be difficult to get these hot, heavy flasks out of the vacuum chamber. The quenching helps break up the investment so it can free up the bronze piece inside. It's time to see if we failed or succeeded. So clearly this one failed, but this one's looking pretty good. Let's get it cleaned up. Now this is the one that I simply dipped in wax, and you can see it didn't fill out. It's very thin and it's a big surface area, which means it radiates heat like crazy. When it's thin and has a large surface area, very difficult to fill. You can see it tried, but it just didn't work. Now the only other thing I could try that I didn't do is I didn't use compressed air to try to blow this out. It's possible that there's some ash or residue that's impeding the metal flow, but honestly I think it's just too thin for the surface area. Now this one turned out fantastic. This side shows every detail of the feather. The back side, it looks like the wax. Kinda ugly, but we just won't look at the back side. I'm going to take a small wire wheel and get this nice and shiny. These little wire wheels are great for giving just a little bit of a shine to your bronze. It's amazing that this is actually a piece of metal that I made. Something to remember, don't ever use one of these little wire wheels without a face mask. These bristles fly off and I can hear them pinging off of the mask the whole time I use it. And it looks like that when I'm done. I also pick them out of my shirt. Better than my face though. You only get one set of eyes, so be careful. There's just a little bit of flashing on the shaft, so I'm going to take a small file and get rid of that. When I sprued it up, I just stuck it into a wax sprue. Now I'm thinking it'd be kind of cool if this was like a quill for writing, but I'd like a little more length than just cutting it off there. So I'm going to cut it off this way. That'll give me a little extra length on the quill. I'll use the angle grinder to take the bulk of the metal off, and then I'll switch to my grinder to grind it down to shape. The file will remove any deep gouges from the grinding wheel. The question is, leave it shiny or patina it? Normally I think a patina looks better, but I also want this shiny. So what I think I'll do, I'll patina it, but then bring it back to a shine, and it should have just a slight color contrast that gives it some highlights. As usual, I'll use the liver of sulfur to add the patina. This glass isn't tall enough to submerge the whole feather, so I'll just flip it back and forth. It's almost hard to tell the difference between the metal one and the real one. A Scotch-Brite brad is all it takes to bring back a little bit of the shine. And I'll put a clear coat of Protect-A-Clear over it. And with that, we'll call it done. I think it turned out pretty cool. Please let me know what you think in the comments. It helps build the channel. Come on back for more videos. Thanks for watching.